All right, now let's discuss the latest unemployment stats. We are now joined via Zoom by Dr. Sanele Gumede, an economics lecturer at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Dr. Gumede, thank you so much for your time. Were you expecting these numbers? You know, a few analysts were not too optimistic, going into these numbers, and yet the rate of unemployment decreased by 1 percentage point, from 33.9% in the second quarter, as we said in our intro, to now 32.9%. In the third quarter of the year.
Good afternoon, Onata. Good afternoon to the viewers as well. It's always interesting to get the numbers dropping in this quarter, but there's still something that really it still doesn't sit well to say that at least a third of people who should be getting employed are not employed. 32.9% is still a very high number in that regard. But also, if you as we go along to it, you see that the large portion of the youth being unemployed, youth from 15 to 25, being unemployed, it's very alarming because South Africa, the average age is youth. If the average people, majority of them, they are unemployed, it does paint a different picture for the future of the country.
And like you say, it doesn't sit well because the numbers are still staggeringly high. So when you look at the changes in these figures, how accurate then would you say that the QLFS is, when measuring the quarterly data as compared to more long-term data?
Yes, here with these numbers, it's very good. That's the chart in the quarterly labor force survey. So we see how it's happening here, and again they do present numbers to say to check who have been, say, long-term unemployed, long-term. In these numbers that we see here, they estimate that about 77% of the numbers that they present of unemployment, 70% of those are long-term unemployed, and 23% of those are short-term unemployed. But obviously, if you're looking, still, this short-term one, they do tell us what's happening in this quarter, different quarter. Again, also understand seasons have a long impact here as well. As we're looking at from September to December season, and again, if you're looking at the festive season, you might see slightly better numbers of unemployment, people being employed for employment for festive seasons, and always if you look at the first quarter of the year from January to March, you always expect these numbers to be a bit higher. And obviously being better towards as you go along towards the festive season. This quarterly survey give us that understanding. But if it was a long-term one, we would not really understand that seasonality changes. But again, the question that determines a lot here in terms of getting in unemployment numbers or not, they ask you in the past 2 weeks, if they ask you, have you looked for employment, what situation have changed on your life in that case, and you find that someone might have applied for a job a month ago, but still waiting for results. Because in the past 2 weeks of the interview, you might find that in the past 2 weeks they may not have been actively looking for a job, and then end up being not counted as unemployed. This is why we still have those who may say they are not economically active, even though even though they're still looking for employment. That's why. If you look at the biggest challenge here is if you look at the expanded definition of unemployment, you'll find that the numbers are relatively way too high compared to when you're looking to the narrow definition. That's what we're looking at. For the expanded definition, we're speaking about numbers we are over 40% unemployment versus what we have, what we see now, which is narrow definition. And again, if you look at these expanded and narrow definition, you'll see that in most provinces, I heard your opening where you're looking at Eastern Cape being the highest unemployment. If you look at most provinces, you'll find that there's quite a big difference, especially if you look at Limpopo, KZN, and Northern Cape. There's a big difference between exponent definition and then official definition. One is made, if you look at the character of these provinces, Limpopo, mostly rural, mostly where you are versus where employment is at, adverse geography you find in there, versus what you see in Gauteng and in the Western Cape, where the difference between exponent definition and official definition is very narrow. To say everyone who wants to work, everyone who is eligible to work and wants to work, is easily accounted in those areas. And when you could explain this as well, these differences. If you look at the whites and versus Africans, if you look at unemployment rates, if you look with the whites, you'll find that whites unemployment rates about 8%, both narrow and exponent definition being about 10%. So 8% and just 2% differences. But the blacks, from 47%, if you're looking at the exponent definition versus the narrow definition about 36%. So it still tells us that there's that gap where people are not counted, who really should be counted. So the biggest thing here is that we still have a long way to play in terms of addressing issues of employability, people being employed and people being able to get employed. Yes, the figures, 2% is a drop from the 1% drop from Q2, but job creation is still an issue that South Africa needs to look at.
In fact, let's just talk about that very quickly as we wrap up this conversation. The contributing, factors that continue to weigh down employment. Rather, we know that, of course, the economic growth of this country is one of them. Just briefly give us some of those other contributing factors. We also hearing, of course, that load shedding also has a massive impact.
Yes, one is the biggest thing here, because as I mentioned, that we have people who are long unemployment, that's long-term unemployment. So one biggest thing here is how our economy is structured. I mean, our economy, we try and invite investors who will employ in service sectors, whereas we have a number of unskilled personnel in South Africa. So if you go to this investment summit, we have to prioritize investments which is job creating. I mean, unskilled workers, one big thing is one contributing factor in the country. But then we have to import skills from outside. That's one to replace. Because our employment is mainly prioritizing skilled workers, whereas we have much more unskilled workers. Secondly, obviously, even those unskilled workers in manufacturing as well, which is employed a lot of unskilled workers, but it always suffered load shedding because it relies on the utilities to be sustainable and efficient. And then there's a lot of also other investment that we're lacking in. Or look, if you look at, for instance, Transnet is the biggest logistics contributes in South Africa, for instance. If our rail are not working at all, how do you expect our trade to function? How do you expect our manufacturing to work properly? And all our services. So our SOEs are really a hindrance to our growth as a country, and if those could be sorted very well, will reduce cost of doing business in the country. As a result of it, then we'll have to increase employment figures in South Africa.
All right, Dr. Gumede, thank you so much. Let's leave it there for now.